had them online before I dial up. How they came and they on top and I'm a mile up. I had them online before I dial up.
And then I really like the way he was honest about his struggles with addiction, his childhood trauma, his family issues, and you know, just and it just raises this whole issue, I think, that we don't like to talk about, that we're getting better at talking about among us, but that we're still not good with talking about it. We're still not comfortable with talking about addiction. Romeo Must Die, you were right. Yeah. We're still not comfortable not only talking about addiction, we're not comfortable being decent. We're not comfortable not demonizing people who suffer from addiction, Black folks. And we're still not comfortable talking about mental health and trauma when it comes to Black men. Mm-hmm. I think we're more comfortable with it when it's women, but we still have this weird kind of mental, I don't know what it is, where we think that these issues don't apply to Black men. And DMX, who's, you know, if his born name was Earl Simmons, he struggled with those things. And, you know, you just Google his name and watch some of his interviews where he talked very honestly about these things. Mm-hmm. And he struggled with these issues, the addictions and the trauma and the mental issues. And I mean, it's so sad that the addiction, that he finally he succumbed to his addiction. But I feel like his death makes me more makes me more vigilant to advocate for the mental health and the, you know, the medical health of Black men. Because I mean, it's just, I mean, this, if you listen to the chronology of his music, you see how this brother changed and grew and how he was struggling with these issues, but through it all, he found and stuck to faith.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, this was just a real sad day. You know, to hear that, you're right. We knew it was coming, but it's like, man, it just, and I just can't help but think of all the men, all the brothers, all the Black men, all the young brothers struggling under the weight of all of these things, who didn't have the outlet DMX had, who didn't have the resources that he had to get treatment, to get, you know, therapy. Right. And we just got to do better, y'all. We just got to do better. So rest in peace, rest in power, Earl Simmons, DMX.
Well, you know what, and you're right about everything you said, but when I say that DMX was a very important part, there's a part that a lot of people don't want to talk about that DMX meant. If you did time during the 90s.
Oh, yeah. Come on now.
You know what I mean? Let's talk about that DMX. If you did time, if you was in the state pen during the 90s like I was, or you did any kind of time during the 90s when DMX came out, his voice was the soundtrack of your workout.
Oh, man. Wow, really?
You know, you could not go in any prison yard. At least not in New Jersey, where I was at, and not hear, I mean, like DMX, man. I mean, like that was the soundtrack. And see, one of the most important things is that DMX expressed a part of our manhood that previously wasn't being expressed. What I mean by that is that prior to DMX, you had the what I would call the gangster rap, which expressed one side. Then you had the Conscious Brothers,
right,
like the Public Enemies and all them. You know, you had that. You had sort of like your, but you know, the KRS Ones and all them, and they were all cool. I mean, different facets. But it seemed like DMX, man, like he combined all of them for us. Like, you know, like this was during the crack era. Let's face this.
Right. Come on, let's be real with it.
This was during the crack era, man, where things were just hectic. You heard that in his voice.
Yeah.
You heard that in the way he expressed himself. His rapping style was what we was living at that time.
Yeah.
His rapping style was that chaoticness, that chaoticness of the crack era, the way that he expressed it. It was all of that. It was that hyper masculinity that came with the drug game. It was all of this stuff. It was, I mean, he talked about the robbing. He talked about the, like you said, the addiction part. Talked about the sense of camaraderie that a lot of that formed during the drug era. When you had drug crews, you had either you was out there hustling, so you had the drug crew, but you also had those who was out there robbing, and so you had that kind of loyalty too. So you had a lot of stuff that he expect. I mean, if I sound like kind of hype about, because see, there's I heard a lot of people talk about DMX that since the past, and no offense, they hitting all of the points that you hit, but they're not hitting this, but they leaving out the brothers that was behind the wall and all that stuff. They got hope from DMX because he had that kind of, like when I remember when I first heard him, man, and it was like, I mean, when I first heard DMX, man, I was like in the middle of my bed, and I remember going out to the yard, and man, everybody in the yard, man, was like, yo, man, you gotta hear this cat. You got, and you just heard him all over the place. Wow. And so he was expressing this type of ferocity, this manhood, man, that kind of like, even when you was in a situation where you thought, where you didn't have no power for real. It's just like hearing X voice, man, you felt like you could just conquer the world.
Wow.
So I want to express that, because there's millions of us who gained that kind of strength off of DMX like that, because a lot of us was in there for addiction issues. A lot of us done certain things that landed us inside based upon the choices we made because of the crack era. Either you was on the selling side, or you was on the user side, or you was on the robbing side, or whatever, because the crack era replaced the economy that was taken away from us.
You better come on and preach.
You know what I'm saying? That was taken away from us. So after they took all of that stuff from us, this is what they left us with. And now that we know the complicity of the government in all of this, right? So a lot of us got caught up in that. A lot of us became victims of that, and not knowing how, and knowing like that episode of Snowfall you and I saw the other day, when the father told him, he said, "Man, we survived all of this. I don't know if we're gonna survive this."
That was so key, in that episode. I'm so glad you raised that, because looking back on that period of time, you're in the middle of it and you don't know like the impact that it's going to have, but you know that it is nothing that you've ever seen before. And now, of course, on the other side of it, now I understand the terror that my mom and my aunt had, raising us in a neighborhood that completely changed in a way that they had never seen. But what the father said in that episode of Snowfall was absolutely it. It's like, we've survived the Middle Passage, we survived the transatlantic slave trade, we've survived slavery, we've survived Jim Crow, we've survived all these other things. But as crack is exploding and his own son was involved in it, he's seeing the fallout of it, and he's like, I don't know if we can survive this. And from somebody from your perspective, who was inside the wall, in the midst of it, it had to feel like that. I was a victim of the mass incarceration stage. And I wasn't innocent, so let me get that clear. Okay,
I'm nobody's martyr or nothing. I deserve, I did what I did, and then, and I deserved to get, and I got what I got. So I'm definitely nobody's martyr, but at the same point, is that you had guys in there who if you look back right now, these are the guys they're trying to release now, because they shouldn't have been there in the first place. Right. And so you in there and you're surrounded by all of these young black men. I was in my 20s, my early 20s and stuff when I first got, incarcerated. So, all of us, you had all of this young, virile black manhood that's in there. And this phenomenon of the crack epidemic being victimized, because there wasn't no compassionate response to us. Right. There was no compassion, no matter what side of the fence you was on. There was no compassionate response to us. Nobody wasn't trying to understand where we was coming from. Right. They wasn't trying to understand what made us make the choices that we made, or what contributed to the choices that we made. Nobody. It was all we got was, you jokers are criminals, or you junkies, or you crackheads, or you this. You're a scourge of the neighborhood, and all of this kind of stuff, right? And maybe there was some truth in that. But at the same time, what I'm saying is, getting back to DMX, it was like, like he came at that time. And he came at that time, man, where, he was like, yeah, man, this dude, he made it, he made a lot of us who were struggling with where to go and who we are. A generation of men growing up without fathers, no mentors, just feeling like we just out there. And you heard that, you listen to his lyrics and the camaraderie of the Rough Riders and where my dogs at. For real, most of us were looking for that kind of connection. We were looking for that kind of connection for somebody to have our back. Because so many of us was out there just by ourselves. You know what I mean? So many of us was just out there, man, having to look over your shoulder or by yourself or don't know which way that you want to turn. So here's a guy, man, who went to prison, who had his own struggles like us, who was able to articulate that. He wasn't no college guy playing gangster. Right. A lot of these hip hop artists were doing. He wasn't no guy that got, that had a psychology degree, pretending that he grew up in the projects and all that stuff. This dude lived this. And so his authenticity came through to us. And so, just like I think somebody in the chat says something about how we ridiculed Whitney Houston and we shouldn't have did that. Right. But and we know all the ridicule that X got with his drug addiction and stuff. But you know what? But the thing of it is that behind all of that stuff was real pain. It was real pain with Whitney. It was real pain with Marvin Gaye. Let's go back. We always had this problem. And I think, Jackie, one of the things I will end with this is that when we went on our Twitter account, and one of the things that I said in the Twitter is that, we have to, as a people, we got to set some standards. Now this is just coming from me. But, we got to set some standards, man. I think for too long we allow people to get rich off of our pain. I think we've allowed people too long. We allowed so long for people, man, to get famous and rich and gain all of this notoriety, man, after not just off of our pain, but selling us self-destructive vices that is just no good for us. You know what I mean? And I don't want to get into specifics, man, but I think folks out there know what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? That the fact that we allow people who don't look like us to promote this to us, to our kids, and then want to label that as black culture. That ain't no damn black culture. That is not no black culture. For us to go around talking about killing each other, and for us to talk about this, degrading black women and all this other kind of stuff, to have somebody who don't look like us decide that, this is black culture without no input from us, and knowing the rich history and legacy we come from, to want to say, no, this is who you are. Right. So I don't know, man.
No, you're right. I mean, and people get what you're saying, because Salafu Mac said they're weaponizing hip hop against us, and that's absolutely true. So what DMX was talking about, and I can't help but think of the song and the video "Who We Be."
Oh my God! On my joints there.
That's all of that. Everything that he just said was it. When you watch that video, when you listen to that song, who we be, that was DMX grappling with all of that and trying to remind himself and remind us through his art who we be.
I had them all line before I dial up. How they claiming they on top and I'm a mile up.